anyway. So what I'll do is I'm just going to go over kind of the do's and don'ts of business writing. So really, this is your discussion post. It's actually the answers to your discussion post, but I figure anyone that tunes into this video, either live or they watch a recording of it, that's the advantage of doing it, is they get a chance to kind of do the discussion post, but also prepares you for what I'm looking for in the writing assignments, and really what makes business writing different and unique from what you've learned thus far about writing in your English classes. And of course, English, especially if you took English 1A or English composition, which I think is a prerequisite for this class, you learned all about writing an essay, and you learned about, double spacing your paragraphs, indenting the first line of your paragraph, and then filling it full of all these flowery things to make it sound really impressive. And then your professor probably said, make it 6 pages. So you put in everything you could to make it 6 pages, right? Well, business writing is the exact opposite of that. Now, certainly you still follow the rules of grammar, you still follow the rules of proper sentence structure and punctuation, but it's all about brevity, it's all about clarity, and it's all about presentability, how the document looks. When somebody's going to sit down to read an essay, they're prepared to sit down and read an essay, but when somebody gets your email or your letter, they don't want to have to take a whole lot of time going through that. So they want it to be very visually appealing as well, things that catch your eye so they can scan it. Kind of the key term is scannability. If you can make your document scannable, then you've just accomplished so much for your reader that they're going to appreciate. And that's really the idea, is making your document very scannable. And so that's kind of what I go through in this little business writing video, is I kind of go over the do's and don'ts. And the first half deals with how it reads, which is obvious. It has to have, again, proper sentence structure and all that. And I'll go over those kind of do's and don'ts. And then it's also how it looks. So that's the other 50% of it. So that's kind of how I see if I can get this to work for me. So the first is how it reads. And so my do's and don'ts. So what I'll do is I'll just go through these, and then I'll explain them if they need more clarification. And then at the end, when I'm all done, I'll show you some samples of kind of what I mean by some of these do's and don'ts. So the first one is, business writing is always conversational in its tone. So in other words, it's not meant to be formal. I think one thing a lot of students really struggle with is you say, okay, we're going to do business writing, and then all of a sudden they sound like a lawyer. Everything has to be really scripted out. And really it isn't. It's just plain, everyday conversational language. That's the way you should write. You don't have to be flowery. You don't have to be formal. You also don't want to be too informal either. Like we've learned in this generation to do, the emoji generation. You can use emojis, but you should really not use shorthand. You should use complete full sentences, etc. But just simple, everyday, plain language, not anything fancy. So that's what we mean by conversational tone. Secondly, it should be very positive. The one thing about business writing is you don't focus on what you can't do. You focus on what you can do. You don't say, we can't do that. You say, we can do this instead, right? It's always about redirecting people to what you can do instead. So a good example of this, if you remember, you just did those sentences in your exam. The one I like to point out is the one about the construction not being able to continue because the soil was really wet. Remember? Well, you can make it real negative. You can say, sorry, your construction's at a halt. It's at a standstill. You can use all those negative terms, or you can just say, it'll start soon once the soil is dry, right? So you've taken something that could be negative and you're focusing on what can be done. And that's the idea. So making it positive, again, not harsh, not too negative, being very careful. Some students like to sound like the boss when they write a document. So they're, anyone who does not comply with this policy will be terminated immediately, that kind of harsh,
I can speak from experience and say that never goes over well, ever.
Never does, exactly.
People like solution-oriented, upbeat, positive, and agree that as soon as you use harsh language, then it's like people tune it out.
Yep.
Or they personalize things, right? They take it very personal if you have too pointed of language. So keeping it positive and focusing on the issues, but very solution-oriented. That's what I gather from this.
That's a perfect way to put it. That is exactly right. Yeah, positive. If people, that's the whole idea here is business writing. You want them to get your message. You don't want them to shut you off before they've listened to anything. And that's what they'll do. Like you said, if you're very harsh or negative, they're going to like, wait a minute. And then they take it personal. They don't read anything else beyond what you just said. So keeping it positive, keeping it conversational, that's extremely well solution oriented. I love that. And then the next one is clear and plain. So again, it's in your essay writing, it was all about how flowery and impressive you could be in your essay, what kind of descriptive language could you use? It doesn't mean you can't use that if it's naturally the way you write, but really it should be just clear, simple, plain. And the reason I say that as well, because we live in a culture, especially in Southern California, it's very diverse. And so there's people from all over the world, and just the regular, plain, clear language that you can use that everybody understands, you're going to be able to relate to a broader audience than if you get too, flowery or even just too intellectual in your terminology. So that's the other one, just clear and plain. So it should just be simple. And if you look at the book when you're going through this, as you're reading your chapters, you'll see it gives you some great examples of kind of what to avoid, kind of wording to avoid. And rather than have this long run-on sentence that says, because really is all it's saying, just use the word because, right? That kind of thing. So it does a great job of that. So that's the next one. And then thirdly or fourthly, it should be you-centered. So we spend a lot of time on this one in your sentences as well as in the chapter. But the goal there is really it should be all about your reader first, not you just getting your message across, but that your reader understanding your message. And it's in terms of what's going to benefit them, because that's the mindset of everybody. How does this going to benefit me when I'm reading it? And another sentence example that I like to use for this is the one where it says that you can't get cash refunds for your returns. I don't know if you remember that, but it's, because of our national policy, we cannot give you cash refunds for your returns, but only store credit, right? Well, it's all about me as the company and what we have as our policy. I can make that you-centered by saying to continue offering you name brands at discount prices, you can get store credit for return merchandise, however, not cash refunds. I just made it all about you, right? Instead of about my policy. So that's the idea of being you-centered. And again, if you can it's a little harder to describe. It's a lot easier to identify when you see that somebody's not being you-centered. So I'll be looking for that in your writing. And then, of course, brief and short. Your book calls it economical. So business writing is to be economical, meaning that, it shouldn't, again, in your essay writing, you're packing it full, trying to make it 6 pages. Here, you're trying to make it less than a page if you can, unless it warrants something longer. But in all the writing assignments that I'm giving you, none of them should be more than a page. I mean, literally 3/4 of a page, half a page. If you're going into page 2, you need to ask yourself, am I being economical? Because a lot of times you can say what you need to say in a lot fewer words than you're saying it. And some students just naturally are good at writing, but you have to ask yourself, is it necessary? So that's why I say don't have it be long and unnecessary. Just get to the point, make it clear, keep it brief. And my little rule of thumb is in this class, if you're going over a page, you probably went too long on it. It's not economical enough, so you should edit it down. Next one is, this just keeps your document, since you're talking about clear and simple and plain, to give it a little bit of spice is to maybe change your sentence types. Really the simplest sentences are ones that just have, basically one dependent clause and one independent clause, excuse me. And it's just, it's a simple sentence. Mike went to the store. That's a simple sentence. It's great. And if you wrote your whole document like that, it'd be very easy to remember and very clear and understandable, but it makes it a little choppy and that doesn't flow as nicely. So to use things like compound complex sentences or compound sentences kind of just adds a little flair without having to add a lot of wordiness to it. So this is again where you maybe add a comma and the word and or but or because to a sentence. Take 2 of them, make them one a little longer. But you should not have too long of sentences. And this is where, again, I think students usually err to the side of is having the never-ending comma sentence, comma, more sentence, comma, more sentence. And you can the rule of thumb here is when it should be about 20 words roughly. But if you're reading it and you have to, I tell students, if you're reading your own sentence and you have to stop at any point and go back and read a little bit more to catch up, then your sentence is either too long or what I call clunky. It's just not flowing well. Business writing is meant to flow well. You also may want to have somebody else read it. And if somebody can just read it straight through and they're following, you're good. But if they have to stop at any point and go back, then something's not in order. And you could call it punctuation. You could talk about parallelism. You could talk it sentence structure. It could be any of all those things. But just as a rule of thumb, read it. If it flows, then you're on the right track, and your sentences shouldn't be comma, more sentence, comma, more sentence. Just keep it brief. Sometimes students will have a long sentence that's like 3 or 4 lines long, and they could have easily made it into 2 or 3 short, simple, clear sentences. And that's kind of the idea. So that's the how it reads. Let's see. And then of course, obviously proper grammar and punctuation, and not emojis or not shorthand like text messaging. Have your periods and your capitalizations and all that correct, complete sentences, not run-ons, etc. And that's the next thing, not use complete sentences. Sometimes in business writing, especially if you're doing a bullet list, which are very, very, very much encouraged in business writing, is that you would make them complete sentences at least. Even though they can be statements, they should at least be complete statements. And that's something that people forget about. And then use parallel sentences. What I mean there is, and you did some of these on your sentences as well. It was the one about, researchers search something, and then they link cross references. I don't know, there was 3 parts to the sentence, but
Yeah, it was like updating the verb so it all matches.
exactly, you got it. Yeah, that's the idea. Is when you're doing a sentence that lists something within the sentence, 3 things that need to be done or whatever, they should all have the same starting word, whether it be a verb or a noun or an adjective or whatever. And that one was something like, I can't remember, but it was search something, look up something, and then link something, but they didn't have link in the right order. So you just had to turn the word around so that it said search, research, look, and link or something like that. And now it was parallel. So you might want to look that up if those watching don't understand what that is, but it does make your sentence flow a lot nicer. And so be careful of that. That's probably one of the biggest faults that students have who aren't used to writing. But that's a big one that can make your sentence clunky for sure. And that's why it's good to read it and see if it flows well. And then proper structure for your document, body, conclusion, introduction. Everything you write should have some kind of introductory statement, some kind of body, and some kind of concluding statement, even if it is thank you for your time, or some kind of a opening, dear Alex, whatever it might be, that you have to have some kind of communication there that has structure. And then of course, this is a very important one when it comes to how it reads, is group similar things together. So for instance, I don't know if we're doing this in this class or not, but there's a parking memo. I'll show you a sample of it in a minute, but there's a parking memo assignment where if I give you the scenario, it's kind of sprinkled throughout, all the details are sprinkled throughout the scenario. Day shift employees, swing shift employees, back to day shift employees, back to all employees, back to swing shift employees. And what you need to do is you need to group like information. So whatever's addressed to, say, day shift employees should all be together. Whatever's addressed to swing shift employees. So the idea is grouping similar ideas together so that each paragraph kind of stands alone with its own content. And this is where your writing becomes better. This is where you can become really good at business writing, is being able to group similar ideas together and have each paragraph be a complete thought versus 10 thoughts spread out over 5 paragraphs, right? So it's the idea of doing that. And we call this chunking. This is actually where, if you get into any kind of like writing for magazines or writing for online channels, they're going to teach you a lot about chunking. And it's really the idea, again, of grouping things together into small little chunks of information. And that's really what you're trying to obtain in business writing. Is I'm not looking for you to spread out your thought throughout the whole document. I'm looking for you to give me little chunks of information that I'm building as I read and as I scan, and that helps me build the complete picture. And so that's very important as well. And your book spends a little bit of time talking about not chunking, but grouping similar information. And then the only thing that's not in this list I'd like to add, I'm not going to add because I'll lose the rest that I already typed. But make sure that you format your document like it's supposed to be formatted. I'm not sure if that's in the next list or not, but for instance, if it's a memo, it needs to be formatted like a memo. If it's a letter, it should be formatted like a letter. And if it's an email, it should be formatted like an email. And in each one of your writing assignments, you're going to be doing a memo, a letter, and an email. I give you samples for you to look at of what an email should be formatted like, what a letter should be formatted like. And your book also provides numerous examples of all three. So when you're writing your memo or writing your email or doing your letter, make sure you match what you're doing to what's in the book, or it's in the appendix. There's actually an appendix in the back, or even to the sample I provide, and it should be formatted exactly like what I'm giving you to format it like. So for instance, a memo has a title block and it's double spaced and it's tabbed over and it says, to, from, date, subject. It's kind of like an email, but it's not. And that's the way that memo should be laid out. Letter should have either letterhead or return address with a date, with an inside address. So all those things are very important for you to understand. That's one of the goals of this class, is to teach you how to format a letter, format a memo, and format an email. So if you don't do it, what I end up doing when I'm grading these assignments is I'll give you a 0 and I'll say, go back to your book, look up how to format a memo and make yours formatted like that. And then I'll make you go back and redo it. You can, and I'll still give you full credit. I just want you to do it the right way. I don't want to have to grade it and then say it's not formatted like a memo. I'll just send you back and have you reformat it. So that's how it reads, 50%. And now we're going to get into how it looks. Remember, I said that business writing should be scannable. So you want to be able to visually look at it and go, okay, I can get the gist of this really quick by just looking at what my eye catches as I scan down the page. And that's really the idea of business writing. So first off, it should always be single space paragraphs, always. Never double spaced, not essays. Essays are double spaced. Business writing is chunks. So it's single space paragraphs. However, they are also separated by space. So short paragraphs, like maybe 8 lines max. 8 lines max, that's the most. That would be on a long document. If your document is only 8 lines, make it 2 4-line paragraphs. Separate them by a space. Why? Because your eye is able to scan those few lines a lot easier than a block of text. And so it should never all be one paragraph. Even if it's a 4-line, the whole document's only 4 lines. Make it 2 sentences long and separate them by a space. Your eye can read those 2 sentences a lot quicker. So that's the idea. Single space paragraphs separated by spaces. So it should be little chunks of information as you go down the page, separated by space. And that's what we call white space. White space is the space between the paragraphs. And you might say, well, wait, wouldn't it be great to have double spaced and then all that white space between? No, your eye can't grab anything then. When you have little chunks, though, it grabs those really well. So that's short
That's
paragraph.
so true, because even when they send us communications at my current job, like let's say IT is going to be doing an update, even if there's only a few lines and that could have all been a paragraph, they always break it up. When is it happening? Who does it affect? And how will it affect you? Because yeah, and all the communications that come out from any departments that would be considered above me, it's never all one block text. Because truthfully, by the time you get 3 sentences in, you're like, okay, I'm done reading this.
Yeah,
Because it feels long and cumbersome, right?
and it's intimidating. Like you'll get an email,
Yeah,
like,
that too.
so I don't even want to begin to read it at that point. I really don't. I'll show you some examples in a minute here. But so that's it. And then the next one, so 8 lines max. And then you should never use indents, the first line. People still get stuck on that. That's essay writing. That's not business writing. Have it left justified. You can make it right ragged. Right ragged means you don't need to have it square on the right edge, but your left edge should always be straight line, left justified. No indents. And then proper formatting, I do mention it right here. This is where it should be a memo, a letter, whatever it is. And what that really means is that you have the proper margins, that you have the proper title and signature block for the different forms that you're writing in. Like an email, for instance, should have a full signature block. It should have your name, your title, your phone number with extension, your email address, all in the little signature block at the very bottom. And that's important. I mean, I was sending an email today, and I included all that because the guy may want to call me. So I got to make sure my phone number's in there. It's like, what if he had a question and he wants to just be able to pick up the phone and call me? If I didn't include that, he has to send me an email back. And what if I went on a 4-hour meeting and then I was going to be gone all until the next day tomorrow, I'd never get back to him, and maybe he needed the answer right away. So it's always important in a business setting to have that information readily accessible to your coworkers and to your customers and others. So that's
I agree. It
Yeah.
makes your email look more credible too, right? Because sometimes you send your email to somebody that you think was going to the right place, but really they need to forward it to somebody else, and they may not have been expecting that correspondence from you. So now they know who you are, what your title is, what company you work for. They don't have to sort of question all of that, which brings up another good point too, because when you're working at a company and dealing with the electronic communications, you have to worry about spamming and phishing emails, right? So that's one of the things that you look for when you're trying to identify a phishing email is, does it have a signature? Does it look like how you would format your email? So it's a good indication to let somebody know, hey, this is a credible email coming from a credible source. It's not a phishing campaign.
That is perfect. That's great. I mean, I didn't even think of that. You're exactly right, though. It gives credibility to your document. And it's like, it's not just from some weird source or who knows who this guy is, Now you have
Right.
a name and a title below your name so that people know, hey, this is Eric. He works at Chaffey College, and it gives
Yes.
credibility to that message. So very good. That's excellent. I'll have to start using that now in my little explanation. All right, font size. You don't want your document to be too small, obviously, or too large. So the rule of thumb is between a 10 and 12 size font. And that's why you can fit a lot on a page. If you start going 14, doesn't look that great. Now, if you're doing like marketing communication or some kind of promotional stuff, you can certainly use all kinds of creative things. But it comes to everyday letters, memos, and emails, it really should be about 10 to 12 font. And again, that's probably the rule of thumb on that. And then with that is use headings. So what are headings? Those are those bold little words above a paragraph. We use these to kind of break things down. So the nice thing about headings is if you do them properly, as I'm looking at your email, I can just read the headings and I know already 50% about what that email is about, what you're going to be talking about, because each heading tells me what's each paragraph is going to be talking about. And these are extremely helpful when it comes to making your document scannable, because I can just read the headings and I got a gist of what's going on. In your book, there's a sample. It shows something like 3 things we can do for our customers. And at first it showed it all in one paragraph. And you're like, what? And then the next one, it shows it in 3 little headings of the 3 things you can do for your customers with a paragraph below each of the headings. And you don't even need to read the paragraphs below. You can see the 3 things and you know exactly what you can do for your customers. And that's the idea. It makes it extremely scannable. And so headings is a must. And I encourage you to do it on all of your documents, especially in this class. And then paralleled bullet lists and numbered lists. What they do is they take a paragraph of information and they make it super readable because they put it in a list. And especially if it is a list. What drives me nuts more than anything is students will have a list of things. I need these 7 things done, and they're all packed in a paragraph. And you're like, I don't even know. Wait, hold on. What are they again? Just make it a list. Makes it so much easier. The person who's trying to find those 7 things for you can make it like a checklist even. Okay, I got there we go. All 7 of them are done. And so take large paragraphs of information, especially if it's informational, and put it in a list, bullet list. And again, it should be a bullet list if it's not a process to follow or steps to take. So if you're saying, here's the 6 steps to take, then you should do it in order and a numbered list. But if it's not in any order, just use a bullet list. And these are extremely valuable in business writing as well. And they make your document even more scannable. So imagine short single space paragraphs with a heading over each one, and then little bullet lists. You're going to be able to scan that document in seconds versus what would be in a paragraph take you 5-10 minutes to read. And that's kind of the idea. And then this is a big one, is using what I call style in your paragraphs to make it even more readable. So using bold text, underlined text, italicized text, and even if necessary, all caps. Now people say, don't use all caps because it sounds like you're yelling. It depends, I'll show you a parking memo in a minute. And it says, if you don't have a white sticker on your car, you will get a ticket. That might be something you want to put in all caps and make it very clear that employees, if they don't pay attention, they're going to get a ticket. And if you put it in the regular font in the middle of a paragraph, they're going to say, oh, I didn't even see that. But you separate it by itself and put it in all caps, they have no excuse. It's right there for everybody to read. So utilize this. I think, and personally, I mean, what I'm looking for is for students to use headings and bullets, but even in the paragraphs, let's say they have a 6-line paragraph that's all just text, there should be something in there that grabs my eye. Maybe the most important statement all in bold, or something underlined that I can scan that paragraph and I know, okay, this is about, the social media marketing position they're talking about, because that was highlighted. So logically go through your document and look for things that you can make stand out and make it stand out. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nobody's going to go, oh, look at all the bold text they used in their thing. They're going to go, thank you, because I can read this so quickly and I don't have to read through long paragraphs because you got it all laid out for me. And then again, fit it on one page. My rule of thumb is, unless you need 40%, that may be a little stretch, maybe 25% of the next page, then you should fit it on one page. If you can use 25% or 40% of the next page, then make it 2. But if you can't, and you can edit it down, get it on 1. That's the goal. But what you don't want is, the whole thing, and then you have one sentence on the next page. That's just a waste, especially on memos, because memos oftentimes are put on bulletin boards, around the company. And you don't want a 3-page memo if you can help it. Make it 1 page. So that way everybody sees it and it's not ignored. If it's 3 pages, they probably won't read it. So
Yeah, when I think of a memo, I think of something that should be able to fit on 1 page so it could be printed easily and passed out if it needed to be.
usually find memos, like I said, on the bulletin board in the break room, new policy, new guidelines, whatever it might be. And then the other thing with business writing is there's nothing wrong with using graphs and tables, and especially for data things. If you look at any kind of business document or business report, they use pie charts and histograms and photographs, and there's nothing wrong with using that in a business document if it's appropriate, to do that. But anything that you can do to make your document visually appealing and attractive to the eye, that's really what your goal is it should not just be a document they go, it's well written. They should be able to look at it and go, wow, I want to read it. It looks so cool. That's my way of saying it. It looks cool. It's a cool looking document. That's really what you're aiming at. So let's see. I think that's it for my do's and don'ts in how it looks. So let me real quick, just as for fun, I'm going to go and see if I can show you some samples of some of this stuff. So that way we can, I can give you some good examples. So let me start with some bad ones. All right, so let me share my screen. I hope you can see that. So this one's just a bad memo. And I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, I can see it.
So this is what I was talking about. This is day shift employees here, and then it's basically the synopsis I gave them, and they just left it all in one paragraph. And so just a couple things right off the bat. A memo has a full title block at the top with the date and the from, as well as it should have the word memorandum across the top. And then it does not use a signature block at all on a memo. And then this one, of course, is all one paragraph and it's indented, and they did nothing to improve readability. That's what I call, they use no style or no design elements to improve readability whatsoever. So if you got this, I mean, it's not long, so you probably wouldn't be too disappointed, but it's going to be cumbersome to read it when you can make it so much more visually appealing to your audience. So let me go to another one here.
Yeah, I didn't even want to read past the first sentence. It's like, oh gosh. Because like, you know what is true as well is when you don't have good grammar or good punctuation, sometimes you get people like me, like type A personality. I get so distracted by all the things that I would fix that you lose sight of the content itself because you're like, why isn't there a comma there? And why didn't you put that there? And it can be very distracting.
I totally agree. I mean, I've been going over this quite a bit in the last few years, and it's like the more I do it, the more I realize how important this really is to talk about, because it can be so frustrating for people, I think, I
It's
don't know.
very frustrating, especially in the leadership level. Like for me, I mean, I probably talk to my team at least once a week, at least twice a month, if not that, about communication, working on their communication, and making sure they have clear and effective communication. You know, a lot of times people don't proofread emails. And so until you come back and you're asking clarifying questions, they don't even realize. And they'll go, oh, yeah, I understand. I see how that could be misinterpreted, which is why I proofread every single email and every single message I send out, even if it's just a quick Microsoft Teams message, I always proofread it
So
because you just never know. Could just be the slightest little mistake, and now your whole message is perceived in a way that you didn't intend it.
totally, your credibility gets in question because they're like, oh, I did it this morning. I sent out an email and I didn't read the subject line completely, and I sent it.
Hmm.
My wife got a copy of it. She goes, "Oh, you had a typo in the first," and I'm like, how do I do that? I just read it over and over again, but I missed the most
Right.
important thing. So here's another one. This one's at least formatted like a memo in the top. And by the way, a memo should also have either the initials of the author kind of approving it right next to their name up here, or you can also type them at the bottom. That's fine. But again, we have the same issue here. This is just all one big long paragraph, which is kind of ugly. That's not as bad as the other ones I'm going to show you in a second. So let's look at a few more of these. Let's see, which one's this? So there you go. There's one that looks like an essay, right? So you can see it has indents and has double spaced paragraphs. And here, I'll give you a couple more real quick. And then I'll show you the good one just to give you a sample. So this one's not as bad. At least they have a heading and they have a more like a memo, but again, it's double spaced. And they do have a bullet list. So at least they broke it up. That one's not as bad, but again, and now it's 2 pages because they did
I was about to say it's 2 pages though. I don't know. It's a little long.
broke all the rules. So now I'll show you the good one that kind of aiming for. So here you go. This one, it's just I can't shrink it down. Maybe I can a little bit. There you go. All right, so now you have it properly formatted. You have all employees. You have day shift employees, swing shift employees. There you go. It's got a heading. It's got bullet lists. So if I'm a swing shift employee, why do I care about the day shift employees? I'm just going to read what relates to me. And again, right in the middle, please have your white sticker visible to avoid ticketing. By the way, this is the exact same memo that you were looking at as all one paragraph. And
Oh,
you
so
did,
that's all the same information. It's just formatted differently.
yep.
Wouldn't have known that, honestly,
No,
unless you put them side by side.
look how much information you drew out of that that's relevant to you compared to the paragraph that you just read.
Yeah.
So this is really a great example. I mean, it's somewhat not exaggerated. This is what I look for in the writing assignments. And this is not just the memo, this is the emails, this is the letter, all of them. Utilize those design elements to improve your readability. And if a student submits an assignment and maybe they format it like a memo, but then it's all one paragraph or it's double spaced or whatever, I might even send them back with a 0 and say, hey, you formatted it correctly. However, you didn't use any of the guidelines for business writing. Please review my video and redo your assignment and resubmit. And I still give them the chance at full score. They don't lose any points, but I want them to apply these things. So if you're watching the video, or as you are now, Alex, this is kind of what I'm looking for right here. This is a properly formatted document. It utilizes all the design elements to improve the readability. It makes it very scannable and it looks cool. And your audience is going to appreciate getting that versus a paragraph. So yeah, that's probably all I'll talk about today. I don't want to keep this too long, but any questions on that?
No,
Makes sense?
everything was very clear and concise. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Alex, for your time. Thanks for being on the call. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna end the recording. Let me do that.